Good evening and welcome all of you back to another Chris Chan article reading, and I have got to lower my chair because, ladies and gentlemen, well, I hope every single one of you is enjoying your Easter weekend, and certainly I'm going to be enjoying my Easter holiday. Well, holiday, it'll probably mean go straight to work anyway and pretend that you actually care. So, today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to, and I think there couldn't be a better time to describe, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Chan's views on religion. So, good luck, because we're going to be here for quite a long time, so buckle up. So, it's apparently out of date, and there's going to be quite a lot of things that revolve around Chris's jail letters and his neo-spiritual Christianity. Meanwhile, this neo-spirited Christianity is too large or off-topic. It has been suggested we smash its heart level down to 15% and split off the pieces into their own article. Discuss on the talk page. Good. Have we got all that? So let's get started. I believe in God and Jesus too, but God must hate me to put me in the lifestyle I am forced to be cooped with and bored with. Wrong. Chris can't be bothered to actually do anything for himself, so blame God. Blame anybody. Eli Lama Sampankantani, whatever that means, Facebook 2013. Also Chris, several years later. So I dare say, with all due to respect to the Lord, meh. Chris abandons the Christian god for hyperdimension Neptunia goddesses. And something you're going to be hearing of quite a lot in this article, ladies and gentlemen, is references to the video game series Hyperdimension Neptunia, a game series I've actually not played for at least 4 years. I do actually really like, but not as a result of anything that Chris has had to do with it, and you'll see why soon. Religion is the belief in and worship of supernatural powers. Christian Weston Chandler's religious beliefs have significantly informed his beliefs and actions. For most of his life, Chris declared himself a Christian, being an attendant of 3 churches. However, Chris's forms of Christianity deviates from other denominations as he incorporates a grab bag of blasphemous mystical beliefs from unrelated traditions and other sources. Now, before anybody says this, actually, because I have a lot of friends who worship Islam, who worship Buddhism, who are Hindus and Sikhs, one thing I'm actually going to say for the record before we go any further is that when you think about it, there's actually quite a lot that you could look into, especially in regards to Buddhism. I mean, one of my best friends is a Buddhist, and she has a phenomenal outlook and attitude towards life. And whether you want to say this is a result of messages in Buddhism, it's entirely up to your choice. But at the same time, it is entirely what you choose to make of it. So you could choose to actually, if you believe that it's for the right reasons and they sort of formulate a sort of categorization about how you truly look at life. I mean, if we were to take Buddhism, and there's a lot of things that Buddhists believe in terms of messages of peace, which is actually really, really nice. And there are some very, very cool little tidbits. I mean, I'll just give you guys an example. Okay, so just to sort of like give you guys a bit of an example, just through some of these phrases, and let me just see if I can just bigger the image right here, is peace comes from within, do not seek it without. A man is not considered a good man because he is a good talker. Or, peace comes from within, do not seek it without. Share this quote, Buddha, it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. Buddha, the only real failure in life is not to be true to the best one knows. Also, if you light a lamp for somebody, it will also brighten your path. And there are thousands of quotes, again, ladies and gentlemen, you can just look into. And this is the sort of thing that, even if, let's say, ladies and gentlemen, you are not particularly if you are agnostic or atheist, one thing I can absolutely suggest before we go any further is that if you were to look at, let's say, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, if you were to look at like religion from a purely philosophical standpoint, there's actually quite a lot to actually see in this. And yes, absolutely, that's a fact. I do believe that. And also, again, three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. It is a man's own mind, not his enemy or foe, that lures him to the evil ways. We could almost immediately say that actually kind of culminates for a lot of Chris's delusions, but for the sake of this article, ladies and gentlemen, let's sort of... It's going to be extremely difficult, from my point of view, to actually not turn this into an enormously complicated and deeply rich source of information, of wisdom and knowledge pertaining to the effects about one's personal morality in life, even through substantial hardships, even through the hardships experienced by someone else, by their own hand or not. That is what would be referred to as a very ecumenical matter. And, well, I'm not necessarily at odds to say, ladies and gentlemen, that Chris is the sort of person who doesn't or may well and truly have suffered ideological implications, or whether or not his beliefs in false gods and things that have not brought Chris happiness or peace or space in any which way, shape or form. You may argue that, well, there were plenty of resources out there to suggest that Chris could have space and peace of mind, but it's just whether or not Chris could actually find them. The road to Nirvana, ladies and gentlemen, is a long one, but peace is absolutely obtainable. And even in Chris's chaotic life, even to this day, ladies and gentlemen, he can still find peace. Some may argue that Chris does not deserve peace because of the crimes he has committed, the lives that he has damaged as a result of his crimes, and the fact that Chris has no shame whatsoever to say he is not sorry for the things he's done. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, might be the sort of thing that no living person will ever say Chris is deserving of peace, but what I fundamentally believe in, ladies and gentlemen, is that I believe in the act of forgiveness. And truth be told, ladies and gentlemen, is that I'm going to have to do something extremely bold and unprecedented by saying that, you know what, in spite of everything Chris has done, I forgive him. I forgive Chris for what he has done. I forgive Chris for perhaps some of the feelings I've had towards Chris. Maybe, again, I don't pretend to be Jesus Christ, unlike Chris, because if there was any one person from the Bible I would rather model myself after, it would be Saint Peter. Now, again, I promise we'll get back to the article in just 1 second, ladies and gentlemen, but for those who don't know, Saint Peter, outside of being described as the first pontiff or the first pope on earth, Saint Peter was always categorized as the disciple who always got it wrong about Jesus. Maybe not so much the likes of Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot actually betrayed Jesus Christ. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Peter betrayed Jesus Christ 3 times by claiming he did not know who he was, and that he had never followed him, and he did not know anything about him. You may argue that's one, if that makes Peter any less accountable than Judas Iscariot. You may be more than free to think so, but the point is that St. Peter wanted to make things better. Remember, the reason why, to my knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, why Peter was chosen to be Pope is because they wanted someone human. They wanted a representative on earth, someone who is representative of human beings on earth to be the representative of God on earth. And it's probably even for Peter's sort of, not so much his lack of knowledge, but maybe his lack of understanding. It's the same reason why you very, very rarely see any gospel readings in church specifically from St. Peter. Because, well, history has proven through revisions, international versions, ones through the rendition of King James, is that John, Luke, and Mark are infinitely more reliable, and they are more the sort of thing that we are kind of used to, probably because of how they're meant to be depicted. Interestingly enough, Saint Luke, ladies and gentlemen, Luke was always the person who always spoke of Jesus Christ as being a man of great hospitality. So, in case you didn't know that, there you go. So, here we go. Online, Chris cherry-picked the Bible to reinforce his own beliefs, while neglecting doctrine that would have him alter his own conduct. Chris long espoused traditional Christian teachings condemning homosexuality, while ignoring that it also forbids premarital sex, pornography, and gluttony. Speaking of premarital sex, ladies and gentlemen, apparently even prostitution is now at the recording of this video is now classed as a misdemeanor in the state of New York. That's interesting. This dissonance is exemplified in his reaction to the news that Panda Halo had been raped and impregnated by Clyde Cash. He actively encouraged her to spend time with her rapist because a child should know and be raised by both of its parents. Shortly after encouraging her to get an abortion. So apparently Chris is... and again, this is why it's going to be rather infuriating of the idea, ladies and gentlemen, about the idea of Chris talking about religion, because unfortunately, one of the things that Chris doesn't quite seem to fully comprehend and understand is that a lot of Catholics and, probably a lot of Muslims, a lot of Jews, there are very, very stormy debates about what technically counts as life. Does life begin at conception? Does life begin at birth? In fact, even France, only 2 weeks ago, made it a constitutional right for abortion. And this is something that's been in debate largely across Europe. Poland, which at this moment, at the recording of this video, is now a very far right-wing country. They have absolutely forbade abortion. And whether you want to say it's because Poland wants to hold on to the belief that life begins at the point of conception, or whether or not this is just a skirmishing maneuver in order to keep the lower classes quiet and keep them in control, it's a little bit difficult to say. That's the sort of thing where it would need an incredible amount of studying, not just in Polish politics. Outside of the fact that I do have a lot of very good and versed Polish friends throughout my life. So whether or not I would have to, if this is the sort of thing I would have to look into, I'd probably just get some first-hand experience from people I know who are Polish. So I suppose there's that. Not that this is something that Chris necessarily thought of immediately. Chris's narrow view of the world requires that Sonichu and Rosechu in the comics and his true and loyal fanbase in the real world share his religious beliefs. Meanwhile, all trolls will burn in hell. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first thing, again, you have to understand, is that Chris's anguish, his hatred, if you will, for trolls is so palpable, it would make you wonder about why Chris would even claim that he's a Catholic in the first place, because no representative or respectable Catholic would ever wish for doom and failure to his enemies. In many ways, Catholics don't really have enemies. You'll say, what's one of the 10 commandments, ladies and gentlemen? Love thy neighbor. And, well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if Chris was at any point, let's say, all the way back in 2007, decided he was going to amend his ways and choose not to react with scorn or try and get one over on trolls, if he simply ignored him, which is something people have been telling him for years to do, Chris might have actually come out as a very different sort of person. Less embittered, less rage-induced, and less susceptible to being prodded at through egotistical schemes like Asperchu or Liquid Chris. Oh, and also what you're seeing over here, ladies and gentlemen, is Chris's version of the Last Supper. He coloured Jesus last because he liked to serve others before serving himself. Note that Jesus as the... Okay, well... I will... So, apparently, yes, this is apparently meant to be the Last Supper, and there's only, like, one or two things I'm not entirely sure of. Is that, I mean, it's not too bad, I suppose, but here's the problem, is that I'm trying to work out in the back of my mind who is meant to, well, outside of the fact that I thought, because originally I know that, they had to point this out, that this was meant to be Judas Iscariot, but it's a little bit hard to tell, because I thought, who's pointing downwards? Because I think it's meant to be here. I think this is meant to be Thomas, because for those who don't know, ladies and gentlemen, in the Last Supper, Saint Thomas was always depicted as actually pointing downwards. I bet you didn't know that either, but again, these are the sorts of things that actually are... Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, I just have to put this in very, very quickly, is that my dad studied divinity when he was in college. Ironically, ladies and gentlemen, not only did my dad study divinity, he also studied it with a woman who would later go on to be the head of my high school. So I think they're just about the same age. I'm pretty sure the old head of my old high school retired about 3 years after I graduated, so roughly about 2019. And the man who previously, because who was head of my old high school, he was a very learned and a very, very wise scholar of a man himself. He was also by far and away the tallest man I'd ever seen in my life. He was at least 7'4", but very, very skinny. But that didn't matter, because again, he would speak very in great length and about religion, and he would make it make sense. There's even... I know I'm really beginning to drag this out, but you have to understand something very important about myself, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that I've been in Catholic education basically from when I was only from between 4 to 18 years old. So 14 years in Catholic education. The entirety of my secondary education from 11 till 18, I was in an all-boys school, an all-boys Catholic school. And one of the absolute greatest things I learned is that when the old head, I'm just going to call Mr. M, just to, for expediency's sake, he would always, roughly around about either April or May, so just about after Easter, he would always come in and always give an assembly where he would always quote from a song by Connie Booth. Except he would read it as though it was a poem, and it was about Lord, I require more time. He always spoke. He did this once a year, and he always said, "I will." You know what? Maybe at the end I'll pull it up, because I think it makes for fascinating reading. But it's the sort of thing that I constantly want to do, once a year myself, is to almost carry on this tradition. Because people need to be reminded a little bit about how short and how tenuous life can sometimes be. And bear in mind, you don't really need to be a Catholic or any religion whatsoever to understand this. But it's a way of understanding it. It's a way of seeing things in a different light, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, where were we? Under the influence of the idea guys, Chris abandoned his Christian faith and started following the CPU goddesses from the Hyperdimension Neptunia video games on the 17th of December 2017. As his Hyperdimension Neptunia fueled delusions spiraled completely out of control, and oh my goodness they did, Chris came to believe that he is the goddess CPU Blueheart, orchestrating the apocalypse which will create a heavenly new world. Having taken time to read the Bible in jail after his arrest for incest with his mother, not something that most Catholics would ever dream of doing. That's there's an entire essay's worth of things about the sort of things that, again, I know this is something that, again, I'm just going to bring up for the sake of what people have told me about, is that people within the people who have autism have said in the comments before that they reject Chris on principle because they know exactly who he is. People in the LGBT community have rejected Chris on the principle that they know fine well what he is and what he did. But it's interesting to say how many Catholics, if you're a Catholic, for example, would you be on the same idea of rejecting Chris? Would you reject Chris on the principle about what he's done? Would you reject Chris on the principle of the fact that he's blasphemous by calling himself Jesus Christ? Would you reject Chris on the principle that he has no recourse or any suggestions that he's willing to apologize or make amends for the sins he has committed? I mean, I know I've just talked before about forgiving Chris, but it's interesting, I think. I'm saying it because I generally want to forgive Chris, and I have to forgive Chris, so I have to keep my word about these sorts of things. But I wonder if that really is going to make any difference, if that makes sense. Is it good for my soul? Is it good to be in the knowledge that I can actually bring myself to say those sorts of things? Because it's not an easy thing to say, ladies and gentlemen, but we'll wait and see. Having taken time to read the Bible... Okay, we'll go. Chris believes he is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, on top of everything else. His resulting religion, neo-spiritual Christianity, is an unholy amalgam of authentic religious traditions, Christian and otherwise, Trollforgians and narcissism, mixed together with neither forethought nor consistency. He has demanded that watchers worship him, and believes it feasible that he could convince half the world population to join his personality cult. Oh, and by the way, this is apparently a drawing of Christ as Christ Chan and God Emmanuel at the universe core. So apparently, like, Emmanuel is Emmanuel meant to be like a sonatu as well? I mean, this is probably one of the better drawings Chris has done, but for what it is, like, the context of it, I'm just, you know. And as you can see right here, ladies and gentlemen, we just talked about the introduction and this, and we're nearly 25 minutes into this, so... oh boy. Early life. As a Christian man himself, Bob Chandler initially desired to name his son Christian, but was Chicken. Chris's name change from Christopher to Christian at the age of 10 came from what may well have been divine intervention in the form of Leonard Bernstein, who mistook a Christopher as Christian, and in turn the young boy adopted the bare-given name. Chris has since referred to Leonard Bernstein in the same sentence as God himself, and his arguably spiritual interaction with and belief in the bear was the beginning of many unorthodox ideologies. Well, yeah, that absolutely... I mean, it is true that did happen, yes. As to whether or not it's the best thing you could possibly do for your own son, only because a bear said something, I'm not too sure. Chris and Christianity. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whispers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they will commit such things, are worthy of death. Not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Romans 1:28-32. On Chris. Well, I suppose, is this meant to be like the first letter to the Romans? Maybe possibly is, but let's just say, I mean, it is absolutely written as well, it's meant to be a letter, I suppose, so. Romans is a little bit one of the things I'm a little bit less familiar on. My sort of thing is more like Deuteronomy and Numbers and Revelations, or, well, Revelations has very different names, like, it's referred to as the book of the Apocalypse, Revelations, the Revelations from John, or the Apocalypse of Jesus. It's either the Apocalypse of John or the Revelations from Jesus Christ. And, well, those are the sorts of things that are, like, really, again, it's the sort of things that don't even really like get to, even when I was in school, we never really learned anything from Apocalypse or like a lot of the things from, like, say, Samuel's period, I suppose, in the Old Testament. But that's just sort of one and the same. Well, not quite, but, you know. Church attendance. The first church Chris is known to have attended is Korean Canaan Presbyterian Church in Chesterfield County, which he attended as a teenager in the 90s. Chris would later attend Grace Baptist Church, a small Southern Baptist congregation in Charlottesville that launched in July of 2000. In 2008, he was, under mysterious circumstances, forced to leave that community. I assume it had something to do with the She Came for Quick .jpg image, because there is quite a lot of speculation that that was the source behind it, and that probably a lot of unsavory things got into the congregation through, like, somebody may have spoken to somebody, and somebody looked into it, and it's not the sort of thing that perhaps a Baptist church like that would allow in their community. At which point, he and Bob began attending Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church. Although Chris and Bob identified as Methodists as of 2009, Barbara continued to identify as Presbyterian. In spite of this, Bob and Barbara were married in a Baptist church, suggesting that they were never very particular about the differences between Protestant denominations. Wesley Mem is located near the University of Virginia and has an unusually liberal theology. The common conclusion among trolls is that congregations more in line with Chris's tolerance of homos were equally intolerant of him. So he had to come there. The doctrine differences between the Baptist, the Methodist, and the Presbyterian denominations were probably too subtle for Chris to concern himself with, and he likely did not spiritually identify with any particular denomination of Christianity beyond simply being Protestant, or even just Christian, as suggested by his statement that Methodism and Presbyterianism are both of Christian religions. I will say, as I don't necessarily know myself, but whether or not if it means just listening to things that are slightly different, if it means the same, well, if it means, like, you know, the 10 Commandments are the same, if it means anything else should be the same, then the message should still be the same. And if that's just how that is, then I know obviously there are, like, let's say even if in England you were a member of the Church of England and you believe that King Charles III is the head of the church, well, I don't really agree with that personally, but it's things like that, and unfortunately I don't have the sort of time to really get into these level of discussions about the Church of England, Protestantism, Martin Luther, the divorce from the Catholic Church incentivized by Henry VIII. But it's mostly to talk about Chris. So there's that. Early notions of God. Traditionally, Chris had a fundamental belief in an omnipotent, benevolent male God. He also accepted Jesus Christ as the Son of God and the Saviour of mankind. He was reluctant to mention God without also including Jesus, perhaps out of some sense that he must stress his specificality. Christian notion of God, despite other Abrahamic sects, usually completely different words for him. In effect, Chris frequently referred to God and Jesus, or God Jesus, as if they were some sort of divinity, a deviation from the mainstream Christian concept of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that his churches would regard as heretical. And by the way, here's just some things you might want to see for yourselves when it comes to notions of God. September 29th, 2008. Dear Blanca, I am so happy that you are revealed as my true honest sweetheart to be. In the dream I have anxiously waited for since the dreams of me and my future daughter. When before my heart was lost and confused, now I truly see the path to true honest love set formally by God and Jesus. I now can truly hardly wait to meet you around Halloween. If you make it beforehand, we could dress up and go to the local Halloween party. I will make a priority to find for us to go to. How fun! My heart is truly set. I will wait for your guiding light, B-chan. Also to Blanca's grandmother and aunt in Illinois, who will receive this package for her. Please make it top priority to have it ready to give it to her when she arrives to visit y'all soon. And this is meant to be Chris having that dream and claiming a hand to God as well. So Chris was sort of writing this with his hand on his, which is, again, it's really bad because, well, it's sad because we know about what happens next, but then again, it sort of moves on to this. And it's kind of sad in many ways knowing the idea that Chris holds on to this so much. And, well, the only thing you really need to grab from this is that this is God trying to tell Chris and Ivy that they were destined to be together, and insert first kiss for her. And it's Chris's obsession with Ivy was like, I don't know if there's like been any other like gal pal in Chris's lineup who's brought something like really creepy out of Chris, but Ivy probably might be one of them. Probably maybe more than Julie, because of, well, Chris was completely unawares until the very last moment about who Julie really was. But, well, actually, you know what, that deserves a video in itself, so we'll get to it when it comes to it. Chris believes God has a special interest in his own life, which would be consistent with Western monotheism, except Chris's view seemed to view God as more of an instrument of his own will than a supreme being to whom he is subject. In Chris's view of God, the Almighty will overlook his misdeeds, but will punish any who malign Chris. Case in point, the fact that Chris cheated in the Parappa the Rapper contest is not nearly as important as the suspicion that Adam Stackhouse did, and Chris invoked God numerous times in his threats to Adam. Adam, however, is no exception. Chris has been commonly observed invoking the wrath of God in his infantile threats. Along with punishing all trolls, Chris expects God to hand him a sweetheart on a silver platter, but is oblivious to the fact that God has yet to back him up on any prayers. Much like the aleatoria Kahamai, Chris attributes most of his impetus to commands given to him directly from God Jesus in visions. I'd say my spirit is active while I am awake, but it does more when I am at rest or sleeping, he wrote in 2014. His exact beliefs concerning these prophetic dreams are difficult to pin down, but the most rational interpretation is that Chris dreams about something he'd like to do, then wakes up and decides it was God telling him to do it. In Chris's mind, each vision is simultaneously a directive to do something and proof that it will happen no matter what occurs. For instance, after Chris had a vision about fathering a daughter, he decided he was required to actively make that happen while also assuring himself that failure was impossible. Well, it was possible, but maybe Chris was overestimating the lack of failure, if that makes sense. When Chris was being accused of racism for insisting that he can only date white women, he justified this by arguing that his prophesied daughter must be white. You may be arguing to yourselves is that how could Chris know that it was his own daughter that he keeps seeing in his dreams, and which is probably something that Chris never really thought to answer himself about, but, you know, maybe it'll be the sort of thing to run Chris by on, perhaps in the future. Visions from God supposedly confirm that Blanca Weiss, then Pantahalo, and finally Ivy were to be the mother of Chris's child. Despite the fact that each of these women subsequently turned out to be trolls, this proves that God, if he exists, is either not responsible for Chris's supposedly prophetic dreams, or was having a laugh at his expense. an idea which Chris may have later taken to heart. Well, maybe. The afterlife. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast, for we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians 2:8-10, on the place of good deeds in the Christian faith. Like most people, our souls leave our bodies, we end up in heaven or hell, depending on our deeds, misdeeds, and possibly reincarnation, according to Chris. While the idea of good deeds causing someone to go to heaven and bad deeds sending them to hell is a common one, most Protestant theology explicitly states that the salvation of one's soul is based completely on one's faith. Defying this, Chris has stated that one goes to heaven or hell based completely on personal actions. He thinks that he will go to heaven because he's done a lot of good deeds. Likewise, he feels that homos are almost certainly bound to go to hell and need to become heterosexuals to better their chances of going to heaven. You know what's funny about this, ladies and gentlemen? Well, there's nothing really funny about this, but I remember there was a kid when I was like 13 years old, when I was in secondary school at the time, who tried to somehow make the case that gay people couldn't go to heaven. And this is something that, to be honest, I have no idea what brought him to say something like that. And I really didn't have much else to do with him shortly after that. And I've been friends with him for at least a year at that point. But then he just came out with this nonsensical jargon. And I tried to explain to him via simple arguments about why no Catholic would actually ever say that, or deny somebody the rites of passage into heaven, and he, for whatever reason, wasn't having any of it. And, well, there you are. It's the same sort of thing with Chris, is that I reckon Chris might have been... No, he couldn't have been that person. That's, ridiculous. Well, not when I was in school and stuff like that, but anyway. He has also stated numerous times that he feels various trolls are bound for hell for making fun of people over the internet. Mean and cruel, yes, but is it absolutely deserving of hell? Probably not. He has suggested that they commit the S word so that they might receive their eternal punishment faster. Chris, the fact... Wow, okay, I still stick to what I said, ladies and gentlemen, but are you of course Chris would say something as terrible as that. I am not shocked. Maybe I just sort of forgot that he said that. I wish I'd still forgotten it to this day, but wow. Oh my god. So that they may receive in Common Questions, the 9th of January 2010, Forg questioned Chris for threatening damnation against his internet adversaries. You often attempt to scare your trolls by stating they will go to hell. Some of your trolls do not believe in hell. What do you say to them? To which Chris responded, firstly, it is not a scare tactic, it is fact. And second, I say, well, believe it or not, you are not dead yet. Further complicating Chris's ideas of the afterlife, he believes in ghosts, going so as far as to claim that they might have seen one. In 2013, bollocks, I don't believe in ghosts, so if Chris claims he has, whatever, I don't believe it. And that premature death leaves one in limbo. Oh, hang on. No, sorry, I missed a step. In 2013, Chris commented that he had considered the S word, but the only reasons I don't do it are my mother and my dogs, and that premature death leaves one in limbo. In reality, limbo is, in some Roman Catholic views, a state that unbaptized infants were supposed to enter into it when they died. Happy, but excluded from God due to their original sin. Christian views on the S word and the fate of those who also commit the S word in the afterlife is highly varied. His belief that the S word leads one to limbo may stem from the South Park episode Death, in which it is found that the grandfather of a minor character is spending eternity in limbo for having his grandson euthanize him. In the eulogy Chris made for Paddy, he wrote that Paddy has departed from our world here on earth to a doggy heaven. She will run free and play with all the other dogs who are already having fun up in doggy heaven. This suggests that Chris believes that animals, or at least dogs, have an afterlife. I'd much rather there being an afterlife in this world, ladies and gentlemen, for dogs than there be leaving to haunt the realms of 14 Branch Lane Court for all eternity, because there are fates somehow worse than death, in my opinion, and that's probably got to be one of them. Sin. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus Christ, Matthew 5:44. I pray to God in Jesus to kill Jason Kendrick Howe, Chris in the Solitude Girls form. Also, have a goddamn heart attack right now this very moment you read this message, you goddamn bitching whore. Chris's email to Vivian G. Chris's understanding of Christian theology is extremely limited, and he does not seem to know anything about the Bible. Although he apparently owns a copy of the New International Version, his hatred of homosexuals and nothing to do with the prohibition of sodomy in the Old Testament, which he was unaware of until he heard about it on Family Guy. His aversion to spilling his seed and dedication to the unborn have absolutely no basis in biblical passages condemning sexual immortality and abortion. Other than vehemently opposing homos, trolls, and jerk-offs, Chris seems to have little notion about the nature of sin and evil except that people who do things he doesn't like should go to hell. This is completely at odds with the part of Christian philosophy that states all who have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and anyone who repents his sins will be redeemed. Oh, and by the way, this was something that appeared in... was this Solitude Revolution, or was this in Aspertu? But anyway, this is how Alec Benson Leary did it. Excellent question, Micah. You see, sex is like a virus. In the Garden of Eden, it wasn't necessary. But after man's fall from grace, the Lord God Jesus created sex as a punishment for our folly. Because sexual desire is a one-way ticket to hell, now on those rare instances when Kendra and I were worshipping, this is why we don't kiss or touch each other, by the way. When I start to feel the evil urges, I find a tight leather belt and a bucket of ice water always does the trick. Okay, maybe that got a little bit out of hand there, but it's interesting to know that even in the slightly blockier, like Photoshop paint that Alec uses, it's still leagues above Chris. Just in the art department, I suppose. Chris believed that if he confesses his sins to God Jesus, he will be forgiven. Private confessions directly to God are not uncommon in Protestantism, but generally it's assumed that the confessor is doing so out of true remorse and generally to atone for his mistakes. However, Chris abuses the purpose of confession so that he can commit whatever wrongs he wants and then wipe the slate clean with his confession. For example, Chris made a video in which he suggested that Clyde Cash and Jack Thaddeus commit the S-word so that they can burn in hell forever. He later drew them doing just that in his own comic. Just one day after the comic appearance, Chris answered a fan letter asking why he had been wishing the S-word upon them and pointing out that such a wish conflicts with his Christian beliefs. Chris responded that he had confessed to that to God and Jesus, and they have forgiven him on that. Well, if it was that simple, then wonder why Chris didn't just decided... He was probably lying, that's the thing as well, because that's like really unbelievable. One of two things happened. Either Chris wished for the deaths in the video, asked for forgiveness, then gleefully drew it happening afterwards anyway, or he waited until he finally got done saying his piece, then conventionally offered up his confession right after getting everything out of his system. Either way, such a confession is highly disingenuous. When Chris gave in to temptation and cybered with Vanessa Hudgens in violation of his monogamous relationship with Ivy, Chris made a big production out of confessing his sin and seeking forgiveness. This suggests that he previously had little to no experience with the idea of repenting sins before God. Chris clearly does not follow the Christian concept of the 7 deadly sins, as he commits wrath, envy, gluttony, sloth, greed, lust, and pride constantly. Forgiveness. A major tenet in most any religion you can think of is the act of forgiveness. Unfortunately for Chris, he has no idea of what forgiveness really is, and will often hold grudges against anybody he feels has wronged him, sometimes even for years. While some may argue that he did show forgiveness in a few of his videos, even more will argue that such things were done either under an ulterior motive or is meaningless as he goes on to curse and scream at them later. That's the really thing you've got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea that, well, the idea is that if you do wrong, then you have to atone for what you've done. You have to recognize exactly where you've gone wrong, and you have to make amends and know not to do the thing again. Now, again, people break these sorts of things all the time, but if Chris has never taken to the idea that if he ever wants to be conveyed as serious with his actions, then he's got to understand that his actions have larger consequences than he probably thought otherwise. But because he doesn't agree to this viewpoint, he will just carry on as normal and thinking that because he's got God on his side, then it means he can just get away with certain things that other people really shouldn't. For example, Sonager and Rosetrue recall Joseph's story of forgiveness immediately prior to Rosetrue brutally injuring and sexually assaulting Jason Kendrick Howell in vengeance for comparatively innocuous actions. During Chris's court hearing on the 10th of July 2012, it was discovered that Michael Snyder made an honourable plea that Chris be shown leniency, as a felony was a life-changing event that could really harm Chris in the long run. This comes despite Chris scaring his customers away, while he was still allowed in the store, shouting racist slurs at him, threatening to set fire to his business, and injuring him with his car. This was probably the most extraordinary form of forgiveness that anyone has ever shown towards Chris, even after the latter's horrible actions. Chris's show of gratitude was to go against all common sense and commit public slander in a court of law. I don't think that thieving liar deserves a red cent. Now, to be honest, if I was Michael Snyder at this point, I just would have just asked if I could take my apology back, and for this plea bargain just to be, shown the door. But no, they just let it continue as possible. Despite the fact that Chris committed slander, they're just willing to get rid of it. However, Chris has on occasion shown some capacity to genuinely forgive and move on, as shown at MagFest, where he was seen making up with Adam Stackhouse, albeit after 11 years. Such forgiveness was not being extended to jerk-ops, however. Apostasy. Apostasy, by definition, is the abandonment or renunciation of a religious or political belief. For years before the idea guys seized the opportunity to infuse patent absurdities into Chris's mind, Chris appeared to have become somewhat disenchanted with God. Traditional theology has long dealt with the problem of evil in books. Chris is unlikely to read anytime soon. Despite Chris's strong belief that God Jesus was backing him up on his love quest, God was nevertheless imparted upon him such stress and trolling. He seemed to believe that the way prayer should work is the same way a little kid learns to get what they want, by saying please. To Chris, prayer was apparently like ordering a pizza. As long as you pray for something, it will show up for you exactly how you ordered it. Since Chris hasn't exactly gotten exactly what he has prayed for, the fault must lie with God. I mean, that's in Chris's world, that's the only logic he can come to. In a farewell letter, meant for his fellow parishioners at Wesley Memorial, he wrote that God seems fit for some hate-filled reason to continue to curse me as a jinx. On the 7th of September 2013, Chris cursed God's name on Facebook after a run-in with a jerk-op. God is giving me the middle finger yet again. No, he wouldn't. I backed up and scratched a car in El Agrave lot, and she's a damn smoker. Now the damn jerk-off is giving me a hard time. Because you hit a car, Chris, that's... Because I am screaming up at a freaking Emmanuel God, I want God to just kill me now if he is going to keep giving me middle fingers and a damned difficult life. As if, what Chris did couldn't have possibly been his own fault. He explained the reasons for his disillusionment in a May 2013 letter to Kim. Hey Kim, I have just read over some of the webpage fill were relayed to me. I must admit, and Amy is welcome to read this as well, it took me by surprise seeing the words magic and pagan in this religion. I like magic. I have fully accepted Jesus as my saviour and my father, and what I've hear on television. Chris's grammar is just the worst, and congratulations, Chris just admits saying that he will believe what he hears on television. All have informed me about heaven, hell, that the best way to live is as one does without much regret or with moderate acceptance and happiness, and that God is within all of us, as energy and direction. And in the end, we all believe in the same God-S. Yet also, if God is opposed to love us all, why does he let me continue to have a lot of downs in my life? I often feel temptation towards destroying the Lego minifigure I have made in an image of God, or otherwise just torturing it. I admit I am not perfect. But I prattle or digress. So all things considered, Amy, I will be most willing to try your way on, and see how I feel fully about it after. The way I figure it, at least I can still go to my church regardless. Smiley face. Soon thereafter, inspired by Futurama, he seemed to divorce himself from a Christian conception of God altogether, choosing to believe in a rather capricious relativistic deity. The higher force above us is always messing with each of our individual minds every day. Rather, each of you call him God, Emmanuel, Zeus, Buddha, or even the individual destiny of your own. I am not an atheist because I sincerely believe in the higher force above us. Even Jesus may be the higher force's son. But every religion will have you believing in the one same higher force. Right or wrong, it is truly set to each individual perception of every individual soul among us, the billions of people on this big blue marble among marbles in the universe. Chris on Facebook, August 2014. But what about the people who don't believe in this, Chris? What about them? What about the people who won't entertain your nonsense either? What about them? Because this is the sort of thing that could only actually work if people are willing to accept it and then believe it. So your dependency about whether or not you agree on this will have to come from the fact that Chris is trying to conceptually make some sense out of this, which is something Chris has tried, but he's never really managed to make work because, well, he hasn't really convinced me now, has he? Mysticism and sorcery. As early as 2003, Chris has invoked curses against his enemies. Most famous is the Kamehameha borrowed from Dragon Ball Z, which he had employed against Mary Lee Walsh. His magical thinking has been directed in various ways, as when he thought he could shift his body fat about by watching hypnotic internet videos, in recent years he has embraced several occult teachings and practices from the New Age movement, out-of-body experiences, chakras, and special powers associated with crystals, among others. Chris's willingness to embrace magical thinking made him susceptible to manipulation from trolls, climaxing in a strong reality disassociation from brainwashing at the hands of the idea guys. Delusions of godhood. Fear not, for behold, I bring tidings of great joy. Sonichu from Sonichu issue 10, and this is something that, again, I'll probably be going into a lot more detail in other videos, because there's, again, an entire essays of things to talk about when it comes to Chris's Messiah complex, or his God complex. I pray, and not even the things that even Chris in his ego could, suffice. I prayed for forgiveness for the real Christian. Sonichu, will he forgive me? From the voice of Aspie Sonichu, which is meant to be literally just which is meant to be like a Sonichu that has Asperger's. That's what the name is about. Beyond his self-infatuation, visible from any of Chris's creative output, Chris had shown from an early period the nascent belief that he might have been specifically chosen. Chris might have developed a god complex as early as the year 2000, and as the halo floating over his head over the cover of Christian's favourite hits seems to indicate. In his emails to Reggie Fils-Ami, he seems to call himself Jesus. You have my word as an avid gamer, Lamb of God, and humble human being that I will work very hard to save. However, this could also be a malapropism for Word of God. Most definite signs first emerged in late 2009, and have asserted over the decades since into Chris's current apophysis. Starting on page 42 of issue 10, Chris displays a somewhat disturbing twist to the plot, such as it is, of his comics. Ultrasonichu frees Zelina Rosechew from her stony state using his chaotic powers, then appears to dogbind Sonichu with a message similar in tone, if not outright text, to prophecies of the coming of Jesus Christ, complete with arms outstretched as if he were suspended on a crucifix, which, again, is, well, this. Later on in the issue, Ultrasonichu travels to the world of Asperchu, where the characters of that comic inform him that they were forced into their roles by Alec, and that they had been praying to Christian Western Chandler for deliverance and forgiveness. Lo and behold, Chris did send the Messiah Sonichu to end their suffering. Sonichu uses the chaotic remedy to miraculously cure them of their Asperger's syndrome, even though only Asperchu himself had the condition, and gives them new names and new, better looks. It should be noted that, like Jesus Christ, Sonichu was born to a virgin. Got him. Even before this, Chris had directly compared himself to God. In issue 7, after Christian is lost in the time void, Sonichu says this: in the meantime, he will receive the accumulative memories of the passing moments. So in a way, he is looking down on us, like our Lord and God are able to, but the vision may be blurred. Possibly in response to criticism about acting as God in later pages, Chris addressed the issue of the non-canon chaotic combo worshipping him in an incredibly ignorant manner. First, he declares that he is not God, but a servant of him and Jesus, and immediately after goes to forgive Michael, the copycat Sonichu's made over name, for bearing false witness against Chris, as if he has the authority to forgive the breaking of the 10 Commandments, like he's God or something. In addition, only 5 pages later, Angelica condemns those who prefer Alec's artwork over Chris's as blasphemous. So, I know I've spoken before about how I think like the whole Asperchu saga is my personal favourite saga when it comes to Chris. If for no other reason, then, well, there were some points about... I'm like generally like kind of more astounded at the fact that Chris could be so stupid to think that Liquid Chris could outshine the actual true and honest Christian. But this is sort of like Chris flexing his muscles in such an obtuse and unspeakably insane manner that I'm almost kind of have to be a little conceited at the idea that I'm either impressed or just incredibly like taken aback by all this. Because when the time comes and I do like videos about the actual comics, well, there won't be any stones left unturned, I'll say that much. Further evidence of Chris's blossoming God complex come through his answer to some of the frequently asked questions that were put to him via the mailbag, where he states that he considers Sonichu to have over 1 billion fans. The only other character who can claim such a number is God Jesus or Allah Muhammad. This mad mentality is compounded by the fact that Chris is like a god to Sonichu. This means that his opinion of himself is that of a god or of a god's god, or maybe a god's bear. Chris moves in mysterious ways. Chris's God complex has peaked with him believing he is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Why God would ever decide that his son should return in the form of a fat man-child who is currently sitting in jail on counts of incest, we will not know either. As a goddess myself, I am unable to worship in churches. Chris, as of June 2019. It was under the idea guys' manipulation that Chris's gathering apotheosis had come to a head. In November 2017, Chris became obsessed with Hyperdimension Neptunia, a video game/anime series he declared a belief in body sharing with a goddess character who represents the Sega Dreamcast in the series. By consulting with Magi-chan, then leaving his Dreamcast console powered on for 24 hours, in order to focus his own psychic power onto it and pull the goddess into his body. Since then, Chris has come to believe that he's actually a goddess to the Sonichu universe, leading the creation of the devotees of Chris Chan Sonichu. The Quran is to the Bible as Family Guy is to The Simpsons. Whatever that means. Well, it might have something to do with what Chris was probably reading at the time. If there was anything outside the Bible he was reading. Okay. Actually, wasn't it true that Chris was reading the Quran at that point and was even given like his own mat? I'm not too sure, but I have to remind myself if that was true. As of December 2021, Chris is in jail awaiting court hearings. His letters from jail offer insight into his current beliefs. Upon booking, Chris was given a Bible and eventually allowed to purchase various other supplies from the commissionary using fan donations. Among other items, these include 2 Turkish prayer rugs, which Chris uses for warmth and for playing solitaire on. Kengel attempted to send him a copy of the Quran in an attempt to convert Chris to Islam, but it was rejected by the jail, and Chris bought one from the commissionary. He described it as literally all over the place. Well, hang on a minute. I'm going to assume it was like they sent one that was in English and not written in Arabic, because I'm more than certain I know Chris probably wouldn't be able to understand it if someone even translated it. And stated the Muslims are indirectly praying to Bob, and Allah was formed from a piece of her. What? You know what? I almost felt like I exhausted my points about religion almost in the beginning of this video, but now I'm just so like, I'm almost in that state of just saying, yeah, yeah, whatever. I know you're talking out of your arse, Chris, but let's pretend as if I didn't know already. Despite spending nearly all his time alone in a jail cell, Chris claims to meditate 24/7, 365 plus 1 days a year, and have full access to Akashic records, and that he can see into the past and future. He is able to visit alternative dimensions where all his cartoon characters live, and he is accompanied by Magi-chan and Mewtwo, among others. Chris has been documenting his time in jail in his goddess logs. It contains insights from the Akashic Guardian, but also a list of names and addresses of everyone who has written to him. Chris plans to release this after the Dimension of Merge, likely doxing quite a lot of innocent people. Well, pseudo-innocent, I should say. From his jail cell, Chris passes judgment on various people from his life and decides whether they have passed their divine test. Kengel passed, Bella definitely failed by making the incest call public, Dylan Thomas failed by confirming that Chris had said to him that he had sex with his mom, Noel failed and is Chris's version of Judas. Chris feels betrayed by Noel because Noel tattled on him for breaking his EPO by stealing $750 from Bob, which Chris claims to have paid back. Ironically, Noel is now selling silver coins bearing Chris's likeness. I did not know that. Chris is producing various holy items which he mails to people who write... It looks like something Terry Gilliam forgot to draw. Who write respectful letters. These are made from his trash. One is Neo-Spiritual Christianity token, of uncertain purpose, made from the bottom of a styrofoam cup. In other letters, He has included blessed bottle labels from Fanta and Coca-Cola bottles. These bear Chris's very long signature and his NCS logo, which is composed of a standby symbol. Combined with a Christian cross, a blue heart, and Solitude's lightning bolts, the recipients are told to laminate these labels and wrap them around 20 ounces of water bottles for use with water and non-alcoholic beverages. They may laminate photocopies of their label for their spouse and children. Almost certainly not going to be the case, but okay. Some of Chris's letters have included apocalyptic prophecies, some of which he says are already happening. Neurotypical individuals will suddenly speak multiple languages, including ancient ones, and shall download into their brains massive amounts of knowledge from their Akashic records. Their brains will overload and burn with fatigue, and they will appear to be schizophrenic. If you encounter one of these individuals, you should not interrupt them. Animals will speak, and humanoid animals will appear. For the record, apocalyptic theories usually are not accurate. Like, ever. After his release from jail, Chris still maintained belief in being Jesus. In May 2023, he signed a receipt J. Christian Chan Sonichu for a cashier at the Earthbound Trading Company. In August 2023, he changed his PlayStation profile description to read, "I'm Christ Chan Prime." Good Lord have mercy on us all. But if you could believe it, ladies and gentlemen, things go even more out of control with Chris's delusions when you find just the crazy people that follow Chris as well as their sort of deity, if you will. Devotees of Chris Chan Sonichu. Chris had some divine revelations, which he shared on the 2nd of November 2019. In a series of tweets, these revelations are as follows. He is the goddess of the Sonichu and Rosechu species and is of a higher deity level than a CPU. His powers are more apparent and potent in C197, but do exist in 1218. The terms Quickans and Quickanism does not feel or sound fitting for his religion. Focus and Foquix do not sound appealing either. Devotees of Chris Chan Sonichu, Dox is chosen, pronounced Dox like Chris's favourite pastime. And thus, Chris is true and honest religion, Dox, was born. The Dox all share kindness and loyalty, which is a defining figure of a devotee. They also pray to Chris and channel energy to him so he can use his goddess powers. Or Sonichu has noted that it's far easier for Chris to answer prayer in C197 due to his additional power that he has access to in his Chris Chan Sonichu body. Chris can also store this energy in magic stones and often wears these around his neck with the Sonichu medallion. Chris used one of these stones to demonstrate his power even in 1218 by dropping it with as little movement as possible. AKA he's trying to bullshit you because he literally just has his hand and then just sort of until it falls off and tries to make it look as though he did it all on his own. When scaled up to C197 proportions, Chris used which when scaled up to 197 proportions would equate to miraculous healing. Chris thinks that crystals contain healing power and they can make you happy. The first Holy Temple of Dox. In late 2019, the first Holy Temple of Dox was consecrated. The temple has been a central in between and traversing between this dimension, 1218, and its sister dimension, C197. The whole property, including the gazebo and sheds, have travelled back and forth from 1218 to C197 many times, apparently. Unlike most temples, however, almost no Dox congregate there to worship, and instead the temple acts as a private residence due to their deity, Chris. Upon reaching level 40 in Pokemon Go, Chris was able to put the temple forward for an additional consecration ceremony from Niantic, the creators of Pokemon Go, to become the truest and honest Pokestop of them all. When he did, when he did on the 20th of August 2020. However, despite numerous efforts to rally his devotees to help the nomination be accepted, his nomination was eventually denied. The gazebo on the property contains magic power, I guess, and using deity-level powers can be used as a vessel through a portal between the dimensions and can transport items and even living things. Interestingly, in the TSSSF game, its card is a unicorn card, which can be in a relationship with Pony OCs, though this is probably due to Chris using the card game wrong rather than him regarding his gazebo as a as a unicorn. Doctrines of the Devotees of Chris Chan Sonichu. Are you following this, by the way, ladies and gentlemen? Because I'm trying to. Chris's convictions, not that kind, are a confused tangle, ever shifting as Weens twist his malleable perception of reality and his mental state continues to deteriorate. The below seeks to describe Chris's contemporary beliefs as accurately as possible, though information is subject to change in light of new revelations at any time. Chris has hesitated to describe his beliefs as a religion. On the 13th of April 2018, Chris claimed in a Twitter post that he no longer follows a religion, yet he is neither atheist nor Satanist, and over a year later would describe what follows as a belief and faith system, not a religion. And by the way, as well, these are just, again, Jacob Sock, this is, again, something I'm going to have to, devote a lot of time to. And Chris apparently has to address a theological dispute when now I worship Satan, our purple savior, this glorious demon, that I really do not like or approve of. No one should ever worship Satan. Please reconsider Jacob. Despite the fact that, again, if Chris is trying to denounce the idea of worshipping God, then what makes Chris think that, Satan exists? Well, somewhere. Uzume possession. Initially sharing his body with a clone of the CPU goddess Uzume Tanobushi was critical to Chris's newfound religion. Naming the clone that resided with his body as Orange Spiral Seal, Chris believed that he had the powers of the four main goddesses as well as his own powers. In a way, this was a bizarre continuation of his classic love quest. Not only did he believe that he could create a new CPU goddess from the ground up, but that with the CPU, he will bring Crystal into reality and create her as a CPU goddess, saying that is something that God Jesus would never grant to him. Chris's religion has little in the way of ethics, but he has indicated that he believes in the Hindu concept of karma, administrated by himself as an instrument of his vengeance against the jerkops who tormented him in years past. CPU Blueheart. On the 16th of June 2018, CPU Blueheart, also known as Scarlet Celestia, came upon Chris and gave her his powers, making him CPU Blueheart, goddess of Nation, the Commodore consoles, Quickville, and all the Sonichus and Rosechus, and everything else. However, Chris only found out about this on the 3rd of August when his hubby Magi-chan apparently told him. In the same way Chris had connected with his Dreamcast before, this time Chris connected with his Commodore 64 to obtain her memories and soul. This possession helped Chris develop his psychic and electric superpowers, and helped the merge become closer as C-197's characters became more tangible in 1218. He also started feeling more energy surges and electricity flowing in him. Chris also felt long, loud belches as a result of the possession, which were obvious indicators of the impending merge. Chris was being given a lot of responsibility for the merge when he became CPU Blueheart. Chris also claims to be feeling heart attacks that he pulls himself back from. Whilst these are obviously not heart attacks, they are certainly some of the ongoing problems with Chris's health, and these delusions are preventing him from getting the help he needs badly. Worship. As late as August 2017, Chris could be seen in a normal church, albeit irreverently wearing his unicorn cosplay. However, he has since stopped attending, believing that he is unable to worship Jesus or any of the other deities, on virtue of being a goddess himself. I believe in the OCs and deities. Chris appears to his viewers to send positive thoughts to fictional characters, as though through telepathy, perhaps indicating that he believes divine powers requires worship and oblations. Implicit in this is Chris's long-standing secular belief that he has hundreds of millions of earnest followers across the globe. None of that exists, by the way. On the 22nd of December 2018, in a long rant on Twitter about the merge, see the next section, Chris encouraged his audience to pray to him. I encourage everyone to keep faith and pray to the CPUs. You may pray to me as well. How noble and how humble of Chris. He has made several such appeals in months since, and they've fallen on more and more deaf ears. Afterlife and Eschatology. Under the idea guy's lingering influence, Chris believes that departed souls go to C-197, the fictional universe that includes Quickville, other misbegotten OCs, and various media franchises universes, which he believes objectively exists. He teaches that, upon death, one may merge with one's Sonichu counterpart there. Among those who have been depicted in their Sonichu form on the other side include disastrous German Chancellor Adolf Hitler, serial killist and rapist Ted Bundy, and Chris's late father Bob Chandler. Only the true wicked, such as Liquid Chris, are denied this in the hereafter. Satan instead burns their bodies in hell's lava pool, purges them of their memories, and sends their oblivious souls to be reincarnated. Since the autumn of 2018, Chris has taught that we are living in the latter days. From a mixture of offhand comments by comic artists and several weens foddering him with misinformation and dumb inside jokes, Chris thinks that beginning in November 2018, the real world, or Dimension 1218 as he calls it, is in the process of combining with C-197, in what he calls the dimensional merge. Chris has attributed miscellaneous events, past and present, real and fictional, ranging from tragedies like the World Trade Center's destruction to salad recalls, to the impending merge. Originally projected to be complete before New Year's 2019, Chris maintains still that the merge is just about the corner. It should be around the corner, but okay, I suppose that's how Chris put it. Chris foretells massive destruction, heralding the merge that will result in the deaths of about half the world's population, as well as half the fictional characters from C-197. Naturally, Chris, being the goddess in charge of managing this brouhaha, will be spread, or will be spared. Everyone else must take their chances. Survivors will be able to enjoy the company of their favourite cartoon characters in the flesh, as well as their deceased relatives transformed into electric hedgehog Pokemon. Hooray, I guess. Pantheon. In August 2016, Chris revealed that he thinks of God as a goddess. Chris has long considered women to be good and men to be evil, and since Chris does not want to think of himself or God as evil, he simply swapped the genders in his mind, making Tom Girl Christine and Goddess Emmanuel. During a conversation with Joshua Wise, Chris revealed that he had forsaken Christianity altogether, believing instead in the CPU goddesses from the anime Hyperdimension Neptunia. I just had to my back's getting a little bit sore now. Chris's view of God's nature is naive and even childish. He has used the fandom jargon acronym OC as a rough quickism synonym for God, and uses this broad category to include Christ, men represented or respected but not worshipped in their own light, separate traditions like the Buddha, ancient pagan gods such as Zeus, the Neptunia CPU goddesses, and other anime characters, himself and his viewers and lazy ponysonas. He is extremely synectric, believing all of these, including the latter categories of clearly fictional characters intended and universally understood as such, to be real and divine. Monotheism, the cornerstone of Christendom that cannot be compromised, was apparently never assimilated into Christ's thought processes, allowing him to continue regard Christ as a god. He claims to converse with and be friends with Jesus and several other deities. Nonetheless, Chris does not worship literally everybody. In a 2019 Twitter post, he was alarmed by Jacob Sokler's apparent Satanism, saying that no one should ever worship Satan. Concepts of Emmanuel. Chris first uses the term Emmanuel in a Facebook post from August 2014, but it is not until a post from 2 years later, "Oh, for Goddess's Emmanuel's sake," He explicitly uses the name to refer to a female deity and not simply as a typo for Emmanuel, a Christian name for God. Chris probably got the idea of a goddess Emmanuel from one of the feminist or lesbian Facebook pages which he was following at the time, but he took it to be a literal female deity instead of a joke. Somehow, Chris held onto this concept throughout the idea guy manipulations and incorporated it into his CPU goddesses Pantheon. In his jail letters from 2021, Chris reverts to the biblical spelling Emmanuel, probably because that is the spelling he encounters in the Bible, which he has been reading in jail, but continues to refer to the deity as female. Chris calls Emmanuel God above all other gods and goddesses, and claims that she encouraged him to fuck his mother. That clearly cannot be the case. A claim which he also makes in the incest call. In another letter, Chris calls Emmanuel his mother. Ew. Some took this to mean that Emmanuel was really Barbara, but Chris explained in a subsequent letter that Emmanuel and Barbara are two separate individuals and souls. In 2022, he further clarified that, much to the adulation of nobody, I have never ever said nor felt my mom, Barbara Ann Weston Chandler Rosechew, was a god of any sort, nor is she Emmanuel, or even Virgin Mary reincarnated. If anything, Barbara is the reincarnation of Merlin the Magician. Can I just skip this part? But Emmanuel, God above gods, was my father when I was born in Bethlehem over 2,022 years ago. He would be roughly just under 2,000 years ago, but whatever. Emmanuel had changed her gender to female in physicality and form over a century ago. He has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Emmanuel planted an ovum from her ovary into Barbara's ovary to attract me from my forward and back trip through time after what happened with me in 1389 when the universe was divided into my second physical birth on February 24th, 1982, into this immortal body of mine. Chris is absolutely insane. This is like Charles Manson levels of like deranged, or possibly even maybe on the lines of like sort of Peter Sutcliffe and that one, and possibly even, you know, Ed Gein insane. With that, Emmanuel is my mother. I still am half Sonichu physically due to my trip through the apex of the Catholic rainbow of 2003 between Sonichu Prime and Rosie Rosechew Prime. Remember, Emmanuel herself can change her physical form into any creature, including a Sonichu form. Yet, Arceus, the first main one, was manifested from a piece of her. Oh goody, he believes that a Pokemon, which is meant to be like the manifestation of God, is, I don't care anymore. Reincarnation. Chris has said that he's open to the idea of reincarnation, common in Hinduism and other Eastern religions. In 2009, he stated flatly that he believed in the concept. But in 2014, he seemed more uncertain, writing, "It is possible, but I'm not sure." He has yet to offer any criteria for what might cause someone to be reincarnated. While reincarnation was, and to some extent is still embraced by a few Christian sects, Chris has nothing to do with them and seems to have lifted the notion from somewhere else, possibly Family Guy. Chris has suggested that he is himself a reincarnation of various people. If Sonichu, Chris's fictional counterpart, is the reincarnation of the ancient leader of the Cwiki clan, though he does not appear to believe this about himself in real life. However, during the epilogue of Sonichu episode 26, Chris mentions a real-world dream in which he discovered he had been a true and honest lesbian hippie who attended Woodstock in a recent past life. He credits this dream with the realization that he is a female soul and decision to identify as a transsexual as opposed to a cross-dresser, further calling the psychological validity of his gender identity into question. Besides his own reincarnation, Chris's explanation of what happened to Liquid Chris in the Solitude canon mentions Liquid's soul being cleared of all memory of previous incarnations before being reincarnated, as what Chris considers an ironic punishment for someone who dared impersonate him. Chris believes that in other dimensions, people who have the innate ability to swap bodies with others, even inanimate robots. In a jail letter direct to Eels and the Eggman, Chris claims that as the Messiah, he can reincarnate or respawn infinitely, many times, and retain memories of all prior lives. He states in another letter that only a few people besides him have an innate ability to reincarnate. What am I even reading? I don't. How much more is there really? There's like, oh my god, there is like so much more to get into. So I was gonna say I was almost just wanting to sort of like wrap this up, but it might not be for a bit of a while. So I apologize. I know this must be going on for what seems like forever, but don't worry, we're closing in on the end. Neo-spiritual Christianity. Neo-spiritual Christianity, spelled without a hyphen, is Chris's self-proclaimed term for his peculiar set of beliefs concerning reality and faith, developed while confined in jail after being exposed to the Bible. This new belief system combines aspects of Protestant Christianity with his pre-existing beliefs originating in theosophy, the New Age, superstition, and the dimensional merge. Cosmology. Chris believes that he is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and that Bob is the reincarnation of Merlin the Magician. He believes that his affair with Mother constitutes a soul-cleansing operation designed to heal and purify her. Justified by his belief that he is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, Chris upgrades Christianity to neo-spiritual Christianity and created a new 10 Commandments, oh god, this ought to be funny, that serve in part as a statement of secular humanist beliefs, although Chris upholds the prohibition on blasphemy and the observance of the Sabbath. Updated 10 Commandments, or Amendments, by Jesus Christine Weston Chandler, Sonichu, October 14, 2021. 1. Thou may have and worship one or multiple gods, goddesses, and demigods, or even none at all, whichever best feels well and good with thee. 2. Thou may make for yourself an idol that is safe and good and blessed. Thou may not make yourself an idol that is harmful, toxic, or demonic to you or anyone else. 3. Thou must not misuse the name of the Lord your God, or any other god, goddesses, or demigod. God damn it, shall be most punishable as well. Ooh. Remember to observe the Sabbath day, Sunday, by keeping it holy. 5. Honor thy father, mother, and any and all legal guardians who have helped greatly in your raising and support. 6. Thou must not murder, not commit or help another to commit suicide, regardless of circumstances. Regardless of circumstances is like a delightful phrase Chris just puts into these. 7. Adultery is okay, well and good. Is it though? As long as all involved are direct, open, and honest with each other, thou must not commit adultery in secret from thy partners. 8. Thou must not steal. 9. Thou must not testify falsely against thy neighbour or anyone, nor testify without prior knowledge of the greater context and truth of the circumstances and details. 10. Thou must not covet thy neighbour's belongings. I don't think this is the sort of thing we'll catch on. I'm just gonna put that out there. The remaining cosmology of neo-spiritual Christianity synchronizes predominantly Christian beliefs with a belief in the Akashic records originating in theosophy, various New Age spiritual concepts, and his pre-existing belief in the dimensional merge and alternative universes. Chris and other faiths. Given his sheltered existence in the heart of the suburban American South, Chris probably hasn't had much direct exposure to anything but mainstream bans on Protestantism. When his fans asked him for his feelings on other religions during an IRC chat, he glossed over the question and simply reiterated his own unthinking statement of faith. At other times, his comments have been scattered and inconsistent. Other Christian denominations. Chris has no connection to Catholicism, which he seems to regard as a benign but alien practice. In his comics, he assigns to a minor character, Angelica Rosechew, whose faith doesn't particularly differentiate her from the rest of the inhabitants of Quickville. She's still as much of a slut as the rest of her species. Though Angelica, it is obvious that Chris knows almost nothing about Catholicism and seems to think it's just a variety of Protestantism with nuns. He refers to Catholic priests as pastors or pastors, and almost certainly doesn't know the Catholic Bible is different from the one generally used by Protestants. Also, Angelica's home congregation is called Samuel Memorial United Christian Church, which is about the least likely name for a Roman Catholic church that Chris could have ever have come up with. It would have been called something like Saint Mark's or Saint Luke's or Saint Thomas or Saint Peter, named after actual saints and prophets and bishops. And he does at least realize that Catholicism is a form of Christianity, although he probably has no idea what its relationship to Protestantism is. Pandahalo's persona was designed to be a devoutly Roman Catholic, specifically to confound Chris's desire for premarital sex with contraception. Faced with this challenge, Chris tried to argue that God really does allow premarital sex because his pastor said so. Ironically, deference to a cleric or unethical matters is far more typical for Catholics than Protestants. It didn't even occur to Chris that what his pastor said to him wouldn't apply to a Catholic, because Chris is incapable of seeing things from perspectives besides his own. Just as long as they give him the green light, that's just about all she wrote. Chris has described Mormons as not being dateable. Boo, Chris, boo. He has never explained why, but he may have learned it through Anna McLaren that Mormons typically don't date non-Mormons. While it is not clear how much Chris knows about Unitarianism, likely not a lot, it is not hostile toward the sect. Jackie identified as a Unitarian, and Chris was not bothered by this, considering because he didn't know what it was. Given that he has his own religion a la carte, Chris is likely unaware of most of the differences between the sects of Protestantism and the relationship between Protestantism and other kinds of Christianity. He has never been pressed for comment on Eastern variants of Christianity, such as the Eastern Orthodox Church, and it is uncertain what he thinks of these sects, or if he's even aware of their existence. Other religions. Most of Chris's opinions towards non-Christian faiths have been culled from South Park and from other television shows and series. For example, on the 28th of December 2009, Chris wrote a blog entry telling Jack Thaddeus to get out of the closet and go into Scientology. Following this comment, Chris was asked to elaborate his thoughts on Scientology. He said that he neither agrees with it nor disapproves of it. A Sonichu and Rosechew Christmas story and Sonichu issue 11 reveal that Chris has a somewhat basic awareness of Judaism, probably picked up once again by watching South Park. He appears to not understand that Jews and Buddhists don't celebrate Christmas, at least not the religious aspects of it. However, in the way he wrote it, it is unknown if he's implying that Christians, Jews, and Buddhists go to the same place to worship, or of worship, or if he's saying they go to separate places of worship and calls them churches, because his vocabulary is heavily lacking. In Michael Snyder is Cold-Hearted and Mean, Chris uses Jew as an insult, which he also got from South Park, and states he is just throwing it out there, that he thinks Snyder is Jewish. He incidentally subscribes to his father's view that Snyder, Megan Schroeder, and others were secretly directing the trolls to ruin Chris's life. Some favoured comedians is a thinly veiled, furious backpedaling attempt in which he rambles on and on about how he respects Jewish comedians like Jerry Seinfeld. Some may argue why he would insult Michael Slider the way he did, but there you are. As long as it's just about what Chris wants at the moment. Speaking of things at the moment, the idea guys were here. Not to knock... What? Okay, hang on. Not to knock on Muslims, but the Quran is Family Guy and the Bible is The Simpsons. Now, in the realm of interest, ladies and gentlemen, if you do feel like insulted by this, I probably am too, because I don't quite know what is he trying to say that like Family Guy is more extreme? I don't even want to go there. In a Wikipedia article, he hints at a hatred of Islam. Although the article primarily exists to deny various accusations trolls have made about him, he does not deny being a prolific hater of all things not Christian. Years later, in a letter from jail, Chris responded to an apparent attempt to convert him to Islam by stating, "Allah is a good God, yes, but even he has his imperfection," and concerns over his followers and nationality of Islam, and that Islam contains a total population that includes around 40% of toxic haters, fakers, and sinners within it. Wow, for comparison, the base rate of toxic is the global population is only about 18%. Chris's obsessive fan, Kenneth Engelhardt, is a Muslim convert. Chris tolerates his religious beliefs, but has become annoyed with Kenneth's repeated attempts to convert him to Islam. Besides using the popular Western image of the fat Buddha, actually a Chinese monk, and mentioning Buddha a few times, Chris has never shown any knowledge of traditional East Asian religions, let alone any opinion of them. Indeed, Vivian G's belief in Taoism seemed to be a concept he couldn't process, and even seemed to make him uneasy. The New Age. The New Age is an umbrella term referring to a variety of new religious movements and alternative spiritual practices originating in the Western world during the 1960s, whose practitioners are referred to as the New Agers. These practices include various forms of prayer and meditation conducted along a multitude of cosmologies, combined with various pseudosciences such as astrology and alternative medicine. New Age beliefs often encourage magical thinking, which only serve to reinforce Chris's beliefs in his supposed divinity. Unlike most other religions, however, New Age worship does not typically occur in organized places of worship, and instead takes place at home or within for-profit storefronts. So it's kind of like the anarchists' version of religion, in many ways. New Age worship practices frequently incorporate yoga and other exercise routines. Considering Chris's poor physical health and attitudes towards exercise, Chris will never do this. Period. Chris has affirmed his beliefs in various forms of New Age practices in the past, all of which were synchronized with forms of Christianity, and his own beliefs in the dimensional merge. Chris has performed tarot readings, believed in magic stones, and meditated in the hopes of achieving astral projection. Theosophy. Theosophy is a minority religion founded in the 19th century. An adherent of Theosophy is known as a Theosophist, and believers worship at Theosophical societies. Members of Theosophy predominantly consist of converts to their faith rather than family-based groups. Chris has been influenced by Theosophy in his affirmation of the Akashic records, mentioned in various jail letters to fans owing to the religious denial of free will. The Akashic records are believed to be a flawless compendium of all thoughts, actions, and words spoken by all human beings in the past, present, and future. Theosophists believe that they can access the Akashic records to heal past wounds, lift pain and past issues, and find a higher expression for their lives. The origin of Chris's belief in the existence of the Akashic records is unknown. However, Chris appears to incorporate every spiritual or supernatural concept. Regardless of whether it is intended to be religious or purely fictional, he finds it a bizarre pantheon of spirituality. Atheism. But I would certainly not want to be an atheist, because if I don't have God or Jesus by my side, I would be more lost than I was considerably beforehand. Atheists are the devil's spawning, as it would seem, and I would not want to be amongst them who they are to run out of town with the pitchforks and the haste and the fire. As a believer, I would either be I would rather be like a peacemaker, but I certainly wouldn't mind being one with the pitchfork, following the crowd and pushing the atheist out of town. Chris on recalling out Forg/Jeremy. Chris thinking that, again, he can espouse the ideas of trying to be kind and compassionate, whilst also saying he would much rather be running with the crowd, throwing the atheist out of town. Chris strikes me as the sort of person who says the good Samaritan is the one who beated the guy at the side of the road to death just to do some good in the world. That's what Chris strikes me of with this backwards thinking. Chris's opinion of the irreligious is the most felicitating and incoherent, and incidentally one of the best documented. Unsurprisingly, he doesn't seem to like or trust atheists, but even there he has a hard time articulating his opinions. When Vivian asked him to explain why he dislikes them he said, "I don't know, but I do know that they are not believers of God and Jesus." When Chris exposed Forg, his reasoning for wanting people to troll Forg instead of him devolved from "because he's trolling me" to "because he's an evil atheist." In his calling out videos, Chris gave pizza-faced atheist as Forg's defining characteristic, with a heritone unseen vitriol. Chris's half-brother Cole Smithy is also an atheist, although his opinion on this is unclear. In the OkCupid answers, Chris stated that he would not date an atheist. On the other hand, the Wallflower told Chris in one of her emails that she had no religion. As the rest of the correspondence shows, Chris was not bothered by the lack of faith and continued to pursue her/stalk her in many ways. However, in his latter, revised OkCupid account, he states, to the surprise of nobody, that he would be willing to date an atheist if he meant he had a chance at some hanky-panky. So, you could say, also, there are some notes here. 1. For comparison, Christendom, the world's largest religion, made up only 31% of the world population at the time. 2. Chris often suggests he is a goddess of everything, since he asks people who aren't even Rothschilds or Sonnachus, or in any of the provinces, to pray to him. And 3. Chris has even referred to what was most likely a synagogue as a Jewish church. So, there's certainly that to be mentioned. And there's quite a lot of other things as well. I sort of kind of want to go over quite a lot of these when it comes to Chris and religion, because this sort of wants to incorporate a lot of other things I want to do for maybe Easter Sunday. Hopefully is when this video will come out. And well, I would say that's kind of that. Apart from there is one last footnote to this article, is that in one of my recent videos, if you go to Chris's So in order to do this, I have to actually go over to Chris's YouTube channel, and you may remember that I did a video about this a couple of days ago where Chris frequently Chris is fully under the assumption that Chris is so powerful that he can actually just determine that he can be the one responsible behind cursing people and ordering people because blah blah blah. Chris is under the assumption that those at Hasbro are in cahoots with the Russians, and that's what's stopping My Little Pony Gen 4 from continuing. So you could say that Chris, I think Chris is just doing this just because he thinks that this is just funny and normal to do. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is just about all we've got time for, and it's definitely been one of my longest, probably one of the longest articles we've done so far, because we're not really done yet either, because there's still the whole cavalcade of nightmares to uncover when it comes to other aspects of Chris's beliefs, I'm going to call them, as opposed to religious beliefs. And well, I hope all of you guys are certainly, even if, again, on this Easter Sunday, even if you're not having the best time in the world, well, rest easy, my friends, and may God be with you all. And I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.